Welcome to the Energy Exchange, a podcast for deep feelers and quiet leaders. Here, we explore what happens when we start working with our natural energy in both our business and personal lives. I'm Colleen Wallach. I'm a highly sensitive professional who spent years untangling patterns of overthinking, people-pleasing, and playing small just to feel safe. Now, I help others like me step more fully into their power without losing the superpower of their softness. We don't have to be loud to be seen, and we don't have to push to be powerful. Everything is energy. Let's start this exchange. Welcome into today's episode of the Energy Exchange. I am in full-on holiday mode and out of my routine a little bit. I'm actually recording this from my brother's laundry closet, so not sure how these acoustics are going to work out, but if it sounds a little funky, that's why, and we're just going to let it go. We're going to let it be easy. That is the motto of this holiday season. So outside of that, I have kind of a fun topic for today. I want to talk a little bit about intuition. And if you're a highly sensitive person, which I'm going to guess that you are if you're listening, you probably have a pretty strong level of access to your intuition when your energy is clear. And in a lot of ways, it's probably easier for you to tap into that kind of that inner knowing than it is for many of your peers. But here's where it gets tricky. Because our energy is so sensitive, it can also be really hard to trust that intuition or that, that inner knowing, because we are picking up on a lot of other things around us. So what's ours, what's somebody else's, and how do we really trust that? So there's this tension of having that strong intuition, but then not always trusting it, which leads us to a very common practice that I see all the time, crowdsourcing your intuition. And what that means is, when you're looking outside of yourself for permission to trust what you already know deep down. And this is incredibly common, especially for highly sensitive people. And in this kind of rules-based world that we live in, it can feel like the responsible thing to do. It looks like collaboration, but energetically, you're really just not trusting yourself. So what does that look like? It could be asking 5 people for input on something that you're already feeling pretty clear about, or posting a question when, if you're honest, you already know the answer. You could be in a meeting, and I had this experience a lot in the corporate world, and you're hoping someone else will say the thing that you're already thinking so that you can feel validated in that. Like you're basically just waiting for agreement before you trust yourself to speak up. And this isn't really indecisiveness as much as it is just that external validation, looking outside of yourself to confirm something that deep down you already know to be true. And in our rules-based world, that feels responsible, like it's logical, it looks collaborative, especially in the workplace, but we're really just outsourcing our self-trust. So let's talk about why we do this. And, I don't want to say that only sensitive people do this, but my show is for sensitive people, and I am one myself. So I'm speaking from my experience and from my clients' experience. So hopefully this resonates with you. But one of the reasons that we do this is early conditioning. So you probably learned very early on to question your intuition, or maybe you were rewarded for being agreeable. I know I was. If you got your feeling of safety or approval through external validation, this pattern totally makes sense. And many of us were taught that logic mattered more than what we were feeling, especially in business. Like there's this idea that it's actually irresponsible to ignore logic or black and white facts in favor of a gut feeling. So intuition gets labeled as risky or irresponsible. And when a decision carries a lot of weight, when money comes into play, visibility, leadership, our nervous system doesn't reach for wisdom, right? It reaches for witnesses. We need a little more crowdsourcing before we can feel safe sometimes to go with our gut. And there are a lot of costs to this, especially when it comes to business and leadership. And I'm trying to strike a little balance here in my episodes between business topics and life in general. But I do really want to focus on what this means in both a traditional workplace and in your own business, if you're a business owner yourself. Number one, slower decision making. Like once you open the door to a bunch of input, things slow way down. Someone's always going to bring up a new layer or something new to consider. and decisions can really get halted. Second thing that can happen is, especially if you have your own business, diluted messaging. Like if you start getting feedback from a bunch of people, many of whom will not even be your ideal clients, guys, then you might try to make it make sense for everyone. And if you're doing something new, different, outside of the box, it's not going to make sense for everyone. And even if it's not outside of the box, it still is not going to make sense for everyone. But it's going to make a lot of sense to the right people. So we want to make sure we're not crowdsourcing too much, or that we're at least getting feedback from the people that are our ideal clients. Because what happens is when we get diluted, we risk losing our energetic authority. Like we start handing off our brilliance, our ideas, our experience to people who maybe can't even meet us at that level. So that's a really slippery slope into imposter syndrome, questioning yourself, questioning your knowledge and your leadership. And we also lose a little bit of our leadership authority. Like we subtly train clients, coworkers, team members over time that we don't trust our own leadership when we're constantly getting other feedback. Like input matters, but this pattern of never trusting your own ideas, your own opinions, it can reflect how unsafe you feel owning your authority. So never a good look. And then I think the biggest one, and this always kind of gets me, is the resentment I feel when I ignore an intuitive nudge and then later realize it was super on point. So there's resentment for the actual situation that I'm now in, but it's also just disappointment in myself for not honoring what I knew to be true. Like I'd almost rather, in some of these circumstances, had made a decision that I later had to correct than be in that situation when I knew deep down it was not the right decision for me. So here's where things do get a little muddled. I feel like I always have a little caveat in my topics, but not every gut feeling is your intuition. Sometimes it is anxiety, especially if you are a highly sensitive person or have spent a lot of time in fight or flight mode. When something comes in from your deep inner knowing, that intuition will feel very calm. It'll feel neutral, clear. Like even if the situation is stressful, the knowing itself isn't really loud or urgent. It's just something that you feel and you know. Where anxiety feels really urgent, right? It's loud, it's kind of spirally, and we need some immediate reassurance. So there's definitely just a different feeling in your body when something is coming in from your intuition versus anxiety, which all anxiety is fear of what might happen, right? So for me, I really try to not make big decisions from urgency, from my own or someone else's. You know, like a salesperson might tell you, hey, it's limited time, you got to decide today. Well, that may or may not be true. And as much as I don't want to make decisions from my own urgency, I'm also not doing it from someone else's because it's not a clear space for me to be in. So if I can, sleep on it, take a beat, get back into my body. So this isn't really about ignoring data or feedback. It's just important to understand why you're seeking that data. External input can be super useful, but you want to make sure you're not asking for permission. I think some healthy reasons to seek input would be, gathering those black and white facts or information, maybe pressure testing logistics. Maybe you don't know everything. Refining your execution of something would be another good reason. And then, sometimes it is good to poke some holes in something after you've already made the decision internally, just to make sure that you're seeing all of the things. Like, I think those are some fair reasons, but ask yourself, what am I actually asking for here? Is it information? Is it refinement? Or is it permission? Because I think a lot of times we do get in that mode of asking for permission, just not trusting what we really know to be true. So a little bit of reframing, especially for business owners. First thing you want to do is decide privately first. So before you go out and get validation from someone else or ask someone for their opinion, just jot down where your head's already at on the topic. Like, what do you know to be true? And that's going to include facts, experience, gut knowing. Put those all on the same level of importance. And then based on that, if you had to decide right now on the spot without anyone else's input, what would you choose? And then from there, from that place of having made a decision, where do you feel wobbly? Like, do you need a little more clarity on the topic? Do you need more actual information? Or are you just feeling like you need some reassurance that you're doing the right thing? And if you do need more input, like use that to refine that gut knowing, not override it. It's going to add some layers to your decision, but it shouldn't replace that knowing that you have. So to wrap this up, crowdsourcing our intuition is understandable, especially again, if you've lived a life in fight or flight mode. It's really easy to fall into that. But when we make a habit of looking outside of ourselves first, we're teaching ourselves, we're training ourselves that our own knowing isn't enough. So again, when a decision comes up, pause before you ask someone else. Write down what you already know to be true and decide from that place first. Then, if you're going to bring in some outside input, let it refine that thinking instead of replacing it. That's how self-trust gets rebuilt. And your intuition is going to sharpen when you can make it a practice to trust. All right, I'm going to end it there because I'm in a really weird space. I'm not sure how this is going to sound, but if this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you left a quick review. That really helps this podcast reach more people who think and feel the way that you do. You can also find me on Instagram at the.energy.exchange. That's with an X. Thank you guys for being here. I will see you next week.